Few figures in modern history have left a mark as deep, contradictory, and enduring as Mao Zedong. Founder of the People's Republic of China, PRC, Supreme Leader of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, revolutionary theorist, poet, and mass mobilizer, Chairman Mao was simultaneously a nation builder and the architect of some of the gravest disasters of the 20th century. He unified China after a century of fragmentation, foreign domination, and civil war, yet presided over political campaigns that caused famine, repression, and social trauma on a staggering scale. Mao's life mirrors China's turbulent transition from imperial collapse to revolutionary statehood. To admirers, he restored China's sovereignty, dignity, and unity after decades of humiliation. To critics, he represents the dangers of ideological absolutism, personal cults, and unchecked political power. Both interpretations contain truth. Today is Chairman Mao's 132nd anniversary. DFTW wants to present a comprehensive, sourcing-style narrative of Mao Zedong's life and legacy, neither admiring him nor blaming him. We will trace his origins in the rural Hunan Province under the rule of the Qing Dynasty, his revolutionary rise through civil war and anti-Japanese resistance, his central role in building the PRC, his responsibility for the Great Leap Forward famine and the Cultural Revolution, and his late-life strategic pivot toward the United States. Finally, we examine how Chairman Mao's ideas, image, and institutional legacy continue to shape China in the 21st century. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in Shaoshan Village, Xiangtan County, Hunan Province. At that time, China was ruled by the declining Qing Dynasty, which was nearing collapse under the pressure of internal decay and external imperialism. The First Sino-Japanese War in 1894 and 1895 erupted only months after his birth, signaling China's vulnerability and accelerating calls for reform and revolution. He witnessed two Qing emperors, Guangxu and Xiantong. Interestingly, the last emperor of the Qing dynasty, Xiantong, eventually became an ordinary citizen under his reign in the 1960s after being exempted by him from the prison. Mao's family occupied a middle position in rural society. His father, Mao Zedong, had risen from poverty to become a relatively prosperous peasant and grain trader. Strict, frugal, and authoritarian, Mao Zedong believed in discipline and obedience, values deeply rooted in Confucian patriarchy. Chairman Mao's mother, Wen Qimei, was a devout Buddhist, remembered for her compassion, generosity, and sympathy for the poor villagers. Such a household environment produced tension. Mao later described his father as oppressive and his mother as morally exemplary. Many historians see in this family dynamic the origins of Chairman Mao's lifelong hostility toward traditional authority figures and his emotional affinity for the oppressed. Mao Zedong received a traditional Confucian education, memorizing classical texts and learning moral precepts. However, he disliked rote learning and rigid hierarchy. As a teenager, he increasingly resisted his father's authority, running away from home and immersing himself in reading. He was particularly drawn to Chinese history, especially accounts of peasant rebellions, such as the Taiping Rebellion, which had ended only 3 decades before his birth. These stories instilled in him the idea that ordinary people could overthrow entrenched power through collective action. Such a paradigm also explained why he launched the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, when he was dissatisfied with other high-ranking officials. The Xinhai Revolution of 1911, which overthrew the Qing dynasty, profoundly influenced Chairman Mao. Although the revolution failed to create a strong, unified republic, it demonstrated that dynastic rule was not unchangeable. He briefly joined a revolutionary army unit, an experience that strengthened his belief in political action. Mao Zedong later enrolled in teacher training institutions in Hunan, where he was exposed to Western political thought, nationalism, and early socialist ideas. He became an avid reader, studying the works of Rousseau, Montesquieu, Adam Smith, and Chinese reformers such as Kang Youwei and Liang Qichao, who sought to transform the Qing court into a constitutional monarchy like those in Japan and Britain, but failed in the attempt. In 1918, he moved to Peking, today's Beijing, and worked as a library assistant at Peking University. Though his position was common, the intellectual environment was transformative. He came into contact with leading figures of the May 4th movement, including Chen Duxiu and Li Dajiao, the first group of communist leaders to introduce Marxism to China. 1 year later, he witnessed the May 4 movement of 1919, one of the most memorable moments in China's history. The movement arose from China's unjust treatment at the hands of the Western powers after the First World War and radicalized a generation of Chinese intellectuals. China was one of the winners, but at the Versailles Peace Conference, Japan inherited Germany's rights to Qingdao, which sparked the fury of Chinese intellectuals. For Chairman Mao, the May 4 movement confirmed that nationalism alone was insufficient. China required a fundamental social revolution. Marxism appealed to him as both a scientific theory of history and a practical tool for mobilizing the masses. We need to point out that China's Marxism was no longer the original Marxism developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Chairman Mao and his comrades adapted the theory to China's reality. They created a Chinese version of Marxism, in which peasants played an equal or even more important role than the workers. In July 1921, Mao Zedong attended the First National Congress of the Communist Party of China, the CPC, in Shanghai. The CPC initially consisted of only a few dozen members. Still, Chairman Mao quickly distinguished himself by emphasizing the revolutionary potential of the peasantry, a position that diverged from conventional Marxist emphasis on the urban proletariat. In the early 1920s, the CPC cooperated with the Kuomintang, or the Nationalist Party, under Sun Yat-sen in the First United Front aimed at reunifying China and defeating warlords. Chairman Mao worked within the Nationalist Party and was once a Nationalist Party member while retaining a communist membership, organizing peasant movements and promoting land reform. After Sun Yat-sen's death, Chiang Kai-shek turned violently against the communists. In 1927, the Nationalist Party launched purges that killed thousands of CPC members in Shanghai and elsewhere. The Communist Party of China was nearly destroyed in urban areas. Historians called that White Terror. Mao Zedong retreated to the countryside, organizing armed peasant movements in Hunan and Jiangxi Province. He developed a distinctive strategy of protracted people's war, emphasizing political indoctrination, land reform, and guerrilla tactics. These efforts led to the establishment of the Jiangxi Soviet, a proto-state governed by the CPC. The nationalist government launched repeated encirclement campaigns against the communists and forced them to abandon the Jiangxi Soviet in 1934. The ensuing Long March was a grueling retreat across mountains, swamps, and hostile territory. Of the roughly 80,000 participants, only a fraction survived. Politically, however, the Long March was decisive. At the Junyi Conference in 1935, Mao Zedong emerged as the paramount leader of the CPC, displacing rivals aligned with Soviet orthodoxy. Chairman Mao's victory over Zhang Guotao, one of his biggest rivals, during the Long March was a decisive step toward his becoming the supreme leader of the CPC in the following 4 decades. Japan's full-scale invasion of China in 1937 transformed the political landscape. Under popular pressure, the Communists and the Nationalists formed the Second United Front against Japan. While the nationalist government fought major conventional battles, Mao Zedong focused on expanding communist influence behind enemy lines. The CPC organized guerrilla warfare, land reform, and mass mobilization, dramatically increasing its membership and territorial control. Some historians say the Japanese invasion helped the communists become strong and eventually defeated the Nationalist Party in the Civil War after Japan's surrender, which the PRC firmly disagree. In the Chinese mainland history textbooks before the 1980s, the Communist Party of China was framed as the main anti-Japanese force, and the nationalist government was a troublemaker. Since the 1990s, the historic truth has been gradually revealed. Beijing began to acknowledge the role of the Nationalist Party in fighting Japanese invaders. During the war, Mao Zedong launched ideological campaigns in Yan'an, including the rectification movement, to enforce ideological conformity and loyalty. These campaigns laid the foundations for Mao's later cult of personality. Many innocent people were killed during those campaigns. One notorious figure, Kang Sheng, the most feared and controversial in Chinese Communist Party history, was a master of secret police politics, ideological purges, and factional warfare, often described as Mao Zedong's chief enforcer. After Japan's defeat, civil war resumed. Despite U.S. support for the nationalists, corruption, inflation, and military failures undermined nationalist authority. Mao Zedong's People's Liberation Army employed mobile warfare and enjoyed broad rural support. By 1949, the CPC controlled the majority of the Chinese mainland. On October 1, 1949, Mao proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China in Tiananmen Square. In the following years, Chairman Mao oversaw land reform, nationalization of industry, suppression of counter-revolutionaries, and the establishment of a centralized party state. Those campaigns involved significant violence, but also restored order after decades of chaos. After founding the PRC, the country had to choose sides between the US and the Soviet Union. Because of ideological considerations, China aligned with Moscow rather than the United States during the Cold War. The US then imposed decades of sanctions and embargoes against the PRC. Then came the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, which solidified Mao Zedong's domestic authority, established China as a major military power, and brought it closer to the Soviet Union. After the Korean War ended in 1953, China temporarily shifted its focus to economic development. Still, it soon changed course, launching additional political campaigns. One of those movements was the Great Leap Forward, which aimed to rapidly industrialize China through collectivization and mass mobilization. However, unrealistic targets, false reporting, coercion, and policy inflexibility led to economic collapse. At the same time, the Sino-Soviet split put China in a difficult position as well. Mao Zedong began to criticize the Soviet Union as a revisionist power. When Stalin was alive, Mao Zedong reluctantly accepted a junior position and treated the Soviet Union as a senior partner. After Stalin's death, Khrushchev's secret speech condemned Stalin's cult of personality and advocated peaceful coexistence with the West, which irritated Mao Zedong. The two largest socialist countries broke up. Between 1959 and 1961, China experienced a catastrophic famine. The official account of the three-year catastrophe says natural disasters caused it, but many scholars do not believe the authorities' account. Scholarly estimates of excess deaths range from 20 to over 40 million. Our scriptwriter Mark's granduncle was one of them. He died of starvation in those days. Critics say Chairman Mao bears primary responsibility for initiating and sustaining the policies that caused the disaster, and for suppressing dissenting voices. After the famine, China went back to production and construction for a short while before Mao Zedong launched the Cultural Revolution to reassert control and purge perceived rivals. Mobilizing youth as Red Guards, he encouraged attacks on officials, intellectuals, and traditional culture. The remains of Confucius and his grandson were unearthed from their tombs and hung on trees. Mark wrote a poem 10 years ago, expressing his regret over that tragedy. I put the Chinese version of that poem here for those viewers who can read Chinese.
Old vines and trees stand in the sunset. Forgotten family graves hide in the forest. Spring covers the tombs with fresh earth. And rain brings new life to broken stones. Smog rises as evening falls. Crows cry as night approaches. When will his family tree flourish again? Someone sighs deeply across the strait.
The Cultural Revolution resulted in a decade of chaos, education collapsed, millions were persecuted, and social trust was shattered. Mao Zedong remained the supreme authority, even as violence spiraled beyond control, with Red Guards using cannons and guns to kill other factions. The relationship with the Soviet Union worsened by the day, and a border war broke out in 1969 between Chinese and Soviet soldiers. The Soviets even threatened to nuke China. Faced with hostility from the Soviet Union, Mao Zedong pursued a strategic opening to the United States, which culminated in the famous ping-pong diplomacy. The 1972 Nixon visit marked a turning point in Cold War geopolitics and ended China's isolation. Mao Zedong died on September 9, 1976. His death marked the end of the Cultural Revolution. Under Deng Xiaoping, China shifted toward economic reform while preserving the CPC rule, and the future Chinese leaders have not made significant political reforms in the past half-century after Chairman Mao's death. The Communist Party of China officially judges Mao as 70% correct, 30% wrong. He remains a symbol of national unity and sovereignty, even as his catastrophic policies are partially acknowledged as the root cause of some disasters in the 1950s through 1970s. Chairman Mao's influence persists in China's nationalism, centralized authority, and party dominance. His legacy serves both as a source of legitimacy and a cautionary lesson. Chairman Mao was neither a simple hero nor a simple tyrant. He is a giant, and he still lives in the hearts of millions of Chinese. He was a revolutionary who reshaped China, and a ruler whose decisions caused immense suffering. Understanding Chairman Mao is essential to understanding modern China, for his shadow still stretches across its politics, identity, and global posture. His mistakes caused decades of tragedies, but because of him, the Chinese people stood up. We respect him and thank him for making it possible for the country to become a world power of global influence, particularly among underdeveloped nations in Asia, Latin America, and Africa.